I think generative AI is an affront to human intelligence. I'll just put it very bluntly. There is a communication gap that exists between science, ecology, and lay readers like me. Because of the expectation from readers or consumers that something will be distilled so much that they would not be required to think. And cartooning cannot do that. The beautification of a river seems to appeal to the voter of this country far more than the actual conservation of it. I've seen water bodies in my hometown simply being beautified with things as useless as musical fountains installed on them, rather than valuing the migratory birds that visit those water bodies, the agriculture that has been happening around those water bodies, the fishing that has been happening in those water bodies. Art need not make technological jumps every now and then. It can simply slow down and yet be equally meaningful. Very little hope, but yes, there is hope, I think.
Hello, my name is Neha Yadav and I work here at Azim Premji University, Bhopal. Joining us today is acclaimed writer, cartoonist, comics artist Rohan Chakravarty, perhaps better known to his readers as Green Humour. Apart from regularly contributing his comics work to news platforms like The Hindu, Manga Bay, etc., Rohan is also the author of several books, including Green Humour for a Graying Planet, Pug Marks and Carbon Footprints, and Naturalist Study. We will be talking today about the evolution of his artistic practice, the increasing assault on environmental protections worldwide, and the necessity of hope and action amidst climate change related doomsday myth making. Welcome, Rohan.
Thanks a lot for having me here, Neha, and Azim Premji University.
Rohan, as we were discussing yesterday, you got into the field of comics very early on in life. You have some 15 years of experience now. So what was it about the medium that attracted you?
I think it's a very democratic medium. It gives a voice to people who are not essentially writers, and I've always considered myself to have somewhat of a handicap when it comes to just writing and just drawing as well. I'm not fully a fine artist. I don't consider myself a writer at all. So this is a platform that gave me a voice and gave me the freedom to express whatever I want in a very unabashed and a very unreserved manner. And I think comics do that for a lot of artists as well. Comics also do that for a lot of readers, and that is the beauty of the medium too.
Did you always intend to make a name for yourself in the niche of environmental comics? How did that journey happen?
No, not when I started out. I really didn't have a sense of direction. I've dabbled in all kinds of cartooning. I've tried political cartooning. I've tried making cartoons on pop culture, about teenage woes, about social issues, and I really got nowhere. And it was only when I saw my first tigress in the wild that the idea within me sparked that, I have a dormant interest in wildlife. I have a bit of understanding a preliminary understanding of science, and I also draw. And there is a communication gap that exists between science, ecology, and lay readers like me, which also leads to a lot of environmental problems and environmental neglect on part of governments. So I thought this is a gap that I could fill if I honed that skill and created a series of cartoons maybe or comics on the environment. And that was the genesis or the conception of Green Humour.
So you said that you witnessed a tiger in the wild, and that was sort of the moment of inspiration. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So this was back in 2005. I was still, I was a student of dentistry. I really didn't know what to do with the art form. And it was this sighting, this happened in Nagzira. Nagzira is a tiger reserve, not very far from Nagpur, my hometown. And that was the first time I was seeing a wild tigress in her complete glory. And it just, there is an inherent magic about that feline gaze that just changes you as a person forever. And that is what led me to start thinking about how I could use comics to talk about the animal I'm seeing and where that tiger places herself in the larger scheme of things, and how her life is connected to mine and by extension my species. And that was what led to Green Humour, and whatever little success the series has enjoyed, I really owe to that tigress.
Right, right. So you were telling us that you have professionally, formally trained in dentistry,
That's right.
and as quickly sort of abandoned that degree. in your quest for working within environmental comics. So while you do have much more comfort within the discourse of science than, say, many traditional artists, how do you still engage with the demands of what you do now? That is, you are expected to have a certain degree of scientific rigor, but you're also
Right.
expected to communicate it to a lay audience in a way that is interesting.
Yeah. I don't really worry about these expectations too much because essentially, I also do Green Humour to please myself and my own my quest for creative satisfaction. I think that is the primary motive, and what my audiences expect, what my publishers expect, what clients expect is all of it is secondary to me. So I think as long as the first judge of my work is me, I think I have a certain expectation, a certain artistic expectation to live up to, an artistic benchmark to meet, and I think that's what has really kept me going. And of course, there are pressures in my work to juggle science and humor and the more popular aspects of cartooning. But I think the less you worry about it, and the more you let a natural course of things of art steer your art in a particular direction, I think you tend to keep that balance in harmony.
Speaking of benchmarks that you have with respect to the artists that have inspired you and that you want to hold your work up to, can you share with us a little bit about your artistic influences?
Oh, sure. So I consider a few people to be my imaginary mentors, and name a few of them. One was Jendi Tartakovsky, who created this show called Dexter's Lab, and later also Samurai Jack. These are two animated TV shows that had the most profound influence on me growing up. And the very reason why I took to first to animation and later to cartooning in my life is because of these two shows. And later on, I picked up some works by cartoonists like Bill Watterson and Gary Larson, both of who have had tremendous influence on the work I do today. Especially Gary Larson, because of his use of very unconventional, often dark, and very offensive humor, which is something I always aspire to do in my work. And there was also Nina Pally. Nina Pally made this revolutionary film called Sita Sings the Blues. She animated it all by herself, produced it all by herself. And when it came out, I think around 2009-10, it was quite revolutionary, and it had a very significant creative impact on the path of my career. I can't really pinpoint how exactly, but that's how artistic influence normally works. Yeah.
Samurai Jack, I completely agree. It was, as a childhood fan of the show, it had a very distinctive visual aesthetic.
Absolutely.
And now that I do think about your work, I think I can sort of trace some of those.
I'm glad you do.
Yeah.
I'll
There
take
is
that as
a
compliment.
visual resonance.
Okay.
What about any Indian influences from the world of cartoons, animation, comics, anything?
Contemporary, yes. I'm influenced by a lot of contemporary artists. My partner Kripa, for example, she's an award-winning creator of picture books. And a book of hers called Art is a Voice has recently won the Bologna, which is one of the most coveted awards in children's literature. So her work is extremely inspirational to me. The way she is able to bring social justice and children's visual influences together, I think that really blows my mind. And there are quite a few others. Raji Vaip is an illustrator who I've really admired through the course of my career, and just the kind of quirks and the style he's able to bring to illustrated picture books that he works on. I think I aspire to that kind of artistic merit in my work as well. So these are two I could name just off the bat. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the contemporary scenario of environmental comics looks like worldwide? What is the scene like?
I'm only aware of a few people who are doing similar work that I do. One is Seppo from Finland, Seppo Lainonen. Even during the formative years of Green Humour, I used to look up to his work a lot because he would speak a lot about conservation issues in Scandinavia. He's from Finland. So, and he would not refrain from calling out, politicians and larger powers, even when his characters used to be animals or birds, and that really, I think not many people did that kind of communication. The only person I can think of before him would be Ding Darling, the American cartoonist. He was essentially a political cartoonist, but he also drew about the environment because I think he really cared about conservation issues. And there's also Rosemary Moscow. She's Canadian but now residing in the US, and she's a biologist, primarily a biologist, but also a very good cartoonist. So she speaks about just the connections between human beings and nature through her work, and in very profound and very amusing manners. So I think these two are people who are contemporaries and also people I really look up to.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Hindu is one of the places to which you contribute a
Yeah.
regular column. Within the context of mainstream media in India right now, given the tendrils of corporate ownership that are slowly making their way into all of these organizations, and something that you pointed out yesterday, the declining readership.
Yeah.
How does it impact your own practice right now? How difficult do you find it perhaps to really say your truth in the cartoons that these places commission?
I've always felt that even something like cartoons, which essentially do the task of distilling complex information and presenting it as something simple, as something more palatable or even more enjoyable, even that is becoming increasingly difficult for the generations of today to process and to engage with, because it needs you to sit with it. It needs you a certain degree of analysis on part of a reader, because there is nuance in that kind of communication, especially the kind of communication that I am aspiring to do with Green Humour. It is not something that I can just use to spoon feed my opinion on my reader. I would like the reader to engage with the nuances of it and form his or her own opinion, and that is becoming an increasingly difficult task because of shortening attention spans, because of the expectation from readers or consumers, as we call them today, on the creator, that something will be distilled so much that they would not be required to think. And cartooning cannot do that, at least should not do that. So it's always been a tool to get people thinking, to spark debate, to spark discussion, and to eventually inspire individual thought and opinion. And I think the space for that is diminishing with reels, with shorter modes of getting messages across, and also primarily with AI, with the complete onslaught on the human mind by AI.
Speaking of which, what is your stance on AI-generated content, specifically AI-generated comics, cartoons?
I think generative AI is an affront to human intelligence. I'll just put it very bluntly, and I am dead against it. And I don't see myself ever engaging with it, at least in creative practice.
Do the environmental costs of AI underpin this stance that you have?
Oh, absolutely. That is something I cannot ignore, because I draw on the environment, and I have consistently drawn cartoons about AI's cost on environmental resources. And I really urge my readers as well to look those cartoons up. And if it makes sense to you, please use discretion in the way you are using AI in your daily lives.
As a professor, I completely agree. I cannot agree more with the idea that generative AI just strips away your soul if you use it at all. So, Rohan, given that you have been engaging with this field for some 15 years now, how do you think the engagement with environment in India has changed in terms of both culture and legal interventions? Do you see it becoming worse by the day, which is something that we tend to do as adults, or is there space for hope?
It's a mixed bag, I think. A lot of it has worsened, especially in urban context, because we are, as urban citizens, I think we are increasingly being distanced from nature, and therefore feeling less emotionally connected or intertwined with it. And I think that's a growing concern. We are also becoming a population that doesn't seem to value, let's say, our erstwhile relationships with open spaces, with water bodies, because to us what seems to matter now is optics over actual environmental management. The beautification of a river seems to appeal to the voter of this country far more than the actual conservation of a river. And I think that is something that really bothers me, because I've seen water bodies in my hometown simply being beautified with things as useless as musical fountains
Right.
installed on them, rather than valuing the migratory birds that visit those water bodies, the agriculture that has been happening around those water bodies, the fishing that has been happening in those water bodies, and how to sustain the agriculture, the fishing, the birds, rather than just putting a musical fountain in a lake and calling it a a tourist attraction. This is not conservation of an environmental resource.
Right.
And so we have a lot of rethinking to do, we have a lot of recalibration to do. And again, that brings me back to the primary concern that we don't read anymore. And because reading is something that equips us with better understanding, better capacities of understanding nuance, and figuring out ourselves what is good and bad for us and the environment around us.
It's the same kind of thinking that prioritizes optics over actual conservation. I'm assuming that also TomTom's what is in fact a vanity zoo project as like a flagship conservation scheme.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
You said that one of the ways in which we can address this, sort of fight it, challenge it, is by fostering habits of attention, reading, etc. Where do cartoons come in with their specific affordances? Because they're not just read, they're also seen. They, in my experience, tend to be easier to draw students towards, draw young people towards. So are there specific affordances within this medium that you think make them uniquely capable of carrying these messages?
Absolutely. I think just by the virtue of being visual, cartoons are far more accessible to a population than simple text might be. Of course, it has its own limitations because cartooning also relies on language. It also relies on a certain understanding of humor, which may be cultural as well. So you, as a creator, you also have to constantly keep thinking and evolving to circumvent these barriers, to make your own way around what you might perceive as a barrier. So even with my medium, I have been experimenting a lot. I've been trying to do cartoons in various languages. I've been trying to do books in various languages. My latest picture book, for example, is a Hindi picture book, and it's been inspired by an event that happened in my own hometown. So it's something that is relevant to my immediate neighborhood. And I would also urge other creators like me to focus on things that are micro, that are right in your own vicinity, rather than always looking at the global or the bigger picture.
Right.
And I think that's how creators like me can make their work more relevant and make their work matter to the people immediately around us.
Right.
And I think this should be the constant endeavor of an artist, rather than engaging with something like generative AI and figuring out what the next technological step for art might be. Art need not make technological jumps every now and then. It can simply slow down and yet be equally meaningful.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you are encouraging creators to build from the bottom up, right?
Absolutely,
not the top
yes,
down.
absolutely. Yeah, that's
because there's often this idea that environmental conservation is the new in thing because we are now bringing in Western models of the national parks and etc. etc. Even though we have such a rich historical tradition of indigenous attitudes towards the environment that have held us in good stead all this while.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the book that you were talking about, your latest book in Hindi that I think takes something that happened in your local context and talks about it?
Sure, I'd love to. And because we are in Bhopal, the publisher of the book is also from Bhopal, Ecology. They're doing some amazing work, and I urge everybody watching this to just check their catalog out. They've brought out some brilliant comic books, picture books. They also have a periodical magazine that comes out every month called Chakmak. So the book is about an evening. It was Bakrid in my neighborhood, and it's a Muslim-dominated part of the city that I live in. And so there's a lot of buzz on Bakrid nationally, a very festive energy. And in the middle of all this festive, commotion, a porcupine found its way into my colony. It was washed away by heavy rain through a drain that flows through the colony, and it landed up 2 blocks away from my house. And stray dogs had begun to bother it, and the porcupine was, exhausted, astray, didn't know what to do. And fortunately, I knew some people in the Forest Department Rescue Center, so I called them up. And while I was waiting for them to arrive, the drama that unfolded, all the crowd that had gathered, that most of them had no idea what this creature was. And that started, it got me thinking about how much of a disconnect there is between a creature that was very common everywhere in Nagpur, just about 20, 25 years back, to now where even the elderly from my own neighborhood didn't know what this creature is. So just that confusion in people's minds about what the porcupine is, whether it is a dangerous creature or not, how far or how much distance should they keep, and eventually how it was rescued by the forest department. That's the story that the book portrays in a very amusing manner from the porcupine's perspective and not from a human being's perspective.
Oh, I see. Okay. That sounds lovely. And you said that this was done in collaboration with Bhopal's own Ecology.
Ecology, yes.
All right. Excellent. Rohan, as we were speaking before, we tend to be, as adults, slightly on the cynical side.
Yeah.
In our own lifetimes also, we have seen just a violent onslaught on all sorts of environmental protections, both locally and globally. Is there, and sorry to put you on the spot a little bit, but is there any story from all your travels, from all your engagement with animals, with wildlife, that gives you hope?
Very little hope, but yes, there is hope. I think I've learned a lot from my time in Arunachal Pradesh. I've spent considerable amount of time in Arunachal researching for various illustration projects, and these experiences have also led me to better insights into how indigenous practices of conservation work. These are cultures that don't even call it conservation because it is so ingrained in their daily lives. And for example, just the practice of hunting for sustenance has been given such a colonial spin in India, and we tend to think of it as poaching today, whereas it is far less destructive. Or even shifting cultivation, for example, which these communities they practice. It has been proven to be far less destructive than a dam or a coal mine or something that we are so familiar, in central India with. And I think if we start to look at these methods of engaging with nature as inherent methods of conservation, because in order to sustain something like hunting for sustenance, you also have to worry about how much of natural abundance there is around you. So an understanding of conservation automatically comes to a person who is practicing such a mode of living. And I think, of course, I'm not asking everybody in cities to go back to hunting. That's not what I mean. But I mean to say that the more representation we have from members of these communities in governance, somehow, I think our approach to conserving what is around us will keep changing, will keep getting less colonial and more inclusive. And I think it will also begin to affect the way you and I go out to vote and people around us go out to vote in the next election. So that is my hope. That is what I'm also aspiring to do, one cartoon at a time. Whether or not I'm succeeding is up to my audiences to decide.
Right. Thank you so much, Rohan, for sharing so much of your time and your expertise with us today, and for leaving us with such a hopeful note, particularly for our young students, that they have the power to, participate in change through conservation, through their political acts of voting, etc. Thank you once again.
No, the pleasure is mine, Neha, because I rarely get to speak to academicians who are so interested in understanding comics and studying them. And I've learned a lot from this conversation as well. Thanks for making a part of this.
Thank you.